Hi everybody, and a warm welcome to our September 2025 live question and answer session. We are delighted to have you with us this evening, although we do know for some of you it might be really early in the day. We have got some good questions, not tons of questions this evening, about half as many as we normally have. However, that gives me a little bit more time and I won't have to rush through the final few questions. So we hope you're all well and you are enjoying what's left of the summer, and we are hoping there's going to be a lot left of the summer. We think we are ready. We hope we are ready. I've got everything around me that I think I need. So let me pass you over to David so that he can welcome you and check that everything technically is working.
Hi everybody, so welcome again. Patricia Curtis was first on. You're quite often first, Patricia. Elizabeth Radabow from San Antonio, Anne McSkimming from Ashbourne, Denise Aspinall from Bedfordshire, Shirley Mule, Angela Gies, Christina Burton, and lots of people on. How many we've got? 78 people on at the moment. So welcome everybody. I just want to read you this from Jane Duhart. Jane, I'm hoping you're on now. Jane says, so looking forward to tonight, as I'm usually on the floor with my Pilates class on a Tuesday night, and this is going to be one of the few times that she can join us live. So welcome to you, Jane. And she just said, Philippa and David and her amazing team over the years changed and made better our quilting worlds during and after COVID. From North Bar without you, all rock, and I shall miss you in 2028. And that's Jane. So thank you very much from that, Jane. I'm going to hand back to Philippa.
Yeah, so Jane, if we have you on the floor this evening, I hope it will only be through laughing and nothing more serious. But thank you for joining us instead of Pilates. I imagine that they're on a little bit of a summer break, that your instructor has gone on holiday or something, which we all need a break from time to time, don't we? Anyway, Peter is somewhere in the house rushing to pretty himself up, really, I would imagine. I've suggested that he grows his hair a bit longer. When I first met him, which is a long time ago, he had very long blonde hair and a handlebar moustache. That tells you how long ago it was. And I suggested to him that he'd always had long hair as a younger man, and maybe it was just an opportunity to revisit that. So he'll be messing about with his hair because it's at that messy stage where he can't do anything with it. So he's going to rush in at any moment, hopefully, to pull tickets out of the bag for our two winners. So what are our prizes for this month? Well, two lucky people who don't need to do anything, just need to be a member, are going to receive some rotary cutter blades for a 45mm rotary cutter, some regular blades, and some super duper gold titanium blades. So 2 packets of blades, and then a lovely packet of John James size 13, which are massive tapestry needles for all of that corded trapunto, should you wish to do so. So maybe we just wait for Peter and see if he comes to do, the first question. Yeah, I think so.
I can hear him crushing. Yeah. Okay. So, first question is from Dawn Renton. Hi, Dawn. And Dawn says, I use Philippa's method for binding, and I agree that the 1/2 inch looks better than the 1/4 inch on a larger quilt. But I very often get this little dip ridge, and we've got a picture of this, which she's very helpfully sent in. So there, with a little arrow pointing to the ridge, it's a little straight line just before the corner. Does Philippa know what is causing this? What am I doing wrong? And she says, I've loved the classes and I'm enjoying making my way through them all. And that's from Dawn Renton. So Philippa, what do we think?
So Dawn, what I have taught you all to be is super critical, isn't it? I mean, I know I've taught you lots of other things as well, and you've taught me lots of things too. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this. I get this on my quilts. You are bound to have that. There is no escaping it. It is that extra fold of fabric that's underneath. So on the bit that is kind of coming from left to right, the sort of top edge on your illustration, you have got kind of less seam allowance than on on the little section that comes sort of down from top to bottom. Thank you. So you can, if you can see how the binding has gone on, the direction of travel, that is because of the fold. There is no way of getting rid of that. Oh, here he is. Squeaking as he comes through the door. It's the door that's squeaking, not Peter. Okay. So he's just going to interrupt my train of thoughts, I can tell. So absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, the only way you could reduce it is to use a really fine fabric on your for your binding, which I don't generally recommend for kind of utility quilts that are going to actually be used, because you need a robust fabric on there. And the only other way to reduce it is to have a single folded binding rather than a double folded binding, because you simply got fewer layers of fabric. Sorry, fewer is countable, less is not countable, as my husband would so often tell me. So I'm going to compliment you on your flange, so you don't have piping, but you've got a lovely folded piece of fabric between the main body of your quilt and your binding. Your binding looks fantastically uniform. Your corner is perfectly square. Your mitre is in exactly the right place. And that little crease is just what you get because of that extra thickness of fabric underneath. Well? So she's got a little flange. So there's no cord in it from what looks just a lovely pressed piece of fabric. And I actually think it's harder to do a flange than a piping, because you don't have that physical edge to go again. So maintaining a nice even consistency with a flange is even more skillful, Dawn. So just be really happy that you are making beautiful quilts with fantastic binding that I totally agree, ½ an inch does look nicer than a quarter. So well done. Right, Peter, come in. Yeah. We have waited for you.
Yes, I've dashed down from
yes.
I want an only job in this.
No, not at all.
Right.
You better just come and say hello, so people can see you. So I was just explaining that I've suggested that you grow your hair, but it's at that in-between stage and hard to do anything with. It may just chop it all me. Yeah.
I think you should go for the moustache.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
The handlebar, yeah.
Back to the 70s.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, maybe you should try that, Peter. A la Burt Reynolds.
Has one of your lads got one?
Yes. Yeah, Benjamin.
They both have.
I can't remember whether Dan has it at the moment, but Ben certainly has. Yeah. So 2 numbers have been drawn out of the bag there. We will match those to 2 lucky winners, and then at the end of this session we will let you know. Okay. So Peter's
just handing me the numbers, so there we go. Okay, so we will find out later on who those numbers match up to. The next question then is from Susan Stilling, and Susan said, I've had a Janome 525S, quite a basic machine which I find very good for machine quilting. The gadget pictured, which came with the machine, is useful at times for gauging distances, but it will only work on the right hand side of the walking foot, and more often than not I need to measure the space on the left hand side, so the bulk of the quilt doesn't have to pass through the throat of the machine. Can you suggest a way of doing this, please? I hope my explanation makes sense. Oh, we haven't got the picture, so here's the... Oh no, that's the wrong picture. Okay, so I'm going to go to Philippa and I'll put the picture up.
So Susan, thank you for your question. Now then, I don't actually know what the walking foot looks like for the Janome sewing machine, but I'm very pleased to hear that you really like your Janome sewing machine for machine quilting. Now then, what this is a little metal arm that slots into a hole, or perhaps 2 holes in the walking foot, and so you can calculate the distance that you want your lines of stitching to be apart and set that little arm at the distance that you desire, and then you don't have to mark that with a pencil or a pen or any other system. You can just sew your first line and then sew subsequent lines. Now then, with the Bernina walking foot, you do get a left and a right arm, so you can actually swap, and you can have it in the left side or the right side. And I wonder whether that is possible with this. If there are 2 holes and the holes go all the way through, what I would just do is you would kind of turn it upside down. So instead of the it's a bit like a ski really. Instead of the flat bit of the ski resting on the quilt, you would have the kind of just the little downward section would be resting on the quilt. You would want to just have it a little bit up from the surface of the quilt, so it didn't disrupt the flow of the sewing machine as you were actually stitching across the piece of work. But so does that make sense? Could you sort of visualize, could you see how that might go? So I think that is one possibility on it. I mean, the other thing is, and sometimes you get roping and sometimes you don't, but you could sew all of one side and then turn it round and sew the other side. So you could do that. And then, you know, maybe you could work out a method of kind of, if it didn't go through the holes, whether you could actually kind of stick it on with a bit of duct tape or something, because the old Naylor saying is, if you can't fix it with duct tape, you're not using enough duct tape. But if anybody's got any further advice on that who is watching, we do have time to fit that in for Susan, but hopefully that might be a bit helpful, and you might be able to stick it in from the other side, just upside down.
Okay, so somebody's jumped in already. Gillian Hibbard says, Janome, do make a set of left and right bars. So maybe there is something that you can buy that will do that, Susan. So, but anyway, some ideas for you. Okay, the next question then is from Lee Mary Heath. And the question is, hello, do you know of a software or an app that can help me to create diagrams or graphics of the steps for a project bag I created? Every time I take my project holder, people always ask for the pattern, and that's from Lee Mary Heath.
So, hello Lee Mary, and thank you for that question, which is not a type of question that we get very often. Now then, in all of the handouts, all of the books, all of the magazine articles with techniques that I have done, I take photographs as I go along with it. I don't generally try and draw the thing. So my suggestion is that you take photographs as you go along. I do have an incredibly, what shall I say, an incredibly artistic and knowledgeable and practical husband who does actually, and has always done, created all of my handouts. So I present him with the words and with the images, and he then assembles it all together. If there is anything like a line drawing like that, he does that. And I'm going to say he uses a program called InDesign, which is not really a standard thing that most people have on their computers. So I'm very much a kind of pencil and paper girl, and I don't create any of my things like that on paper. I don't create them by the computer. Either, if they are required, Peter does it for me, or I draw them out, or I use, or I take photographs as I go along, which I actually think are the easiest way of doing it, because it's kind of instant, you know, take the photograph, do the next step, take the photograph, do the next step. And with our phones these days, the quality's so good and it's so quick. It makes no sense to me to actually try and actually draw it out. So I'm sorry I'm not giving you a specific program there. Maybe Peter might just elaborate on that a little bit. I can see him coming over. Actually, I didn't even know he was in the room listening, and I was paying him a compliment. I thought he'd left. Is there anything you would like to add to that, Peter? You better come in and rather than talking from the other side of the kitchen where nobody can see you.
I wasn't particularly hanging on your every word, dear, there. About InDesign.
Well, the question was an app or software to create diagrams or graphics for the steps of a project, and I was saying that I tend to take photographs because I find it easier and more. It's just faster and quicker and more efficient, and if you take a good photograph and, you know, crop it, brighten it, do all of those things that you can do in your phone, you know the photographs speak volumes, don't they? You use InDesign, don't you, when you...
Yeah, but I mean, InDesign is a desktop publishing program, really, so yeah, and takes quite a lot of learning. So it's like Word Publisher or something like that, but it's much more sophisticated, and it's also intuitive for an artist, really. I hate Word Publisher
because it's just not good enough. It doesn't have the sophistication that is required.
No, if you want kind of potted explanation, most things from Word have really come historically from the typewriter, right? whereas things like InDesign have come from a light box, and so to do with rearranging photographs and blocks of text on a light box in order to make a page of a magazine, whereas Word and Office and things like that have really come from a secretary with a typewriter and are very much kind of going down a page. And although they now have become much more sophisticated, and obviously you can insert a picture and do all kinds of things with it, because historically they've started at those two different points, the InDesign programs are much better at moving things around on a page.
See, we always learn something from Peter, don't we? Thank you, Peter. That's marvellous. But others of you, again, may have more input on that and programs that they use. But yeah, this is my most favourite tool, pencil.
Okay, thank you for that, Peter. And I'm just wondering, Philippa might be able to give you some advice on where to get a practical husband that can do it all for you. So,
yeah, I'm sorry, my husband is taken and he's not going anywhere other than into the garden.
Okay. So that'll be maybe next month. We'll answer that question. Okay, the next question is from Deborah Hiltbold, and Deborah says, "Hi Philippa and David, going to miss you both. This is Deb Hiltbold from hot Arizona. I'm making the double wedding sample, and my question is, when you're making the melon, it's unclear to her which direction the freezer paper pieces, oh, that's a tongue twister, which direction the freezer paper pieces attach to the end. There are two curved sides and two straight sides. Could you show me, please?" And that's from Deb Hiltbold.
Yes, Deb, I could show you, and I will show you. I hesitate to ask you how hot it is in Arizona. I mean, we've had the most amazing summer here. We've probably had about the same amount of rain as you've had, which is very, very little. But yeah, I can imagine it is incredibly hot. Now then, I have in front of me some of the pieces of paper, the templates that go together to make this actual double wedding ring, and they are part of the class. So if you have this class, you do have these. So you're going to get myself all muddled up here. Right, that is the central piece, and that is cut out, and I use the curved piecing cutting out method where I make that in freezer paper, and then I add 1/4 of an inch, and then this little section, ignore that bit that's missing off the end there. I printed it out on two sides, and so I had to cut what I needed from a single piece of paper that had print on two sides, so forgive me for that. But anyway, that is done by paper piecing, and so that fits on there, but yeah, with the seam allowance off, but not to worry. Okay, and so obviously there is another section that mirrors this one, goes on the other side, and then there needs to be a little piece that goes on the end. So I'll bring that in there and have that. Sorry, can you see those, David? Yeah. Do you need me to shuffle anything? No, okay, it's a little hard to see, isn't it? Okay, so there's the centre, there's a piece section that gets sewn on one side. So there's one sewn on one side, one sewn on the other side, and then these are the little tiny pieces. They're almost like a square, but they're not quite a square because it's got a straight side, slightly curved side, and a slightly curved side. Now, if I move that out of the way, and remember this has got a seam allowance, this hasn't at this stage. It is the curved edge that sews onto this very slight curved edge. And the reason that it's the curved edge is that you're following this curve round, but what you get when you put 4 blocks together or 4 sections together is you have 4 pieces like that, and so all of those straight sides meet together. So it's straight, they come together, and then it's the curve that is continuing round. Can you see that curve continuing round? So the curved side goes onto the strips, and if you think that the straight sides all come into the middle, hopefully that makes it clear to you. Does that make it clear to you, David? Okay, so fingers crossed. I mean, I think the easiest thing whenever you're not sure is to take your paper pieces. I mean, with this one I would cut the seam allowance off it, but then you can just line them all up and you can really tell which is which, and it's always a good idea, you know, write on things which is the straight side, make notes on it, you know, photocopy something like this, or you know, take a photo of it and have it at your side when you're sewing, so you've got like, oh, which way round does that go? Oh yeah, just have another quick look just to remind myself. You know, make the piece of information easily and readily available for you, and then you will get it right every time.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that was clear. Sorry, we had to. The camera was going up and down. We haven't got enough cameras to in this setup in order to be able to look at the table and at Philippa at the same time. So hopefully that was easy to understand. Okay, the next question is from Liz, and Liz, I haven't got your second name, but Liz says, I hate to ask this question, but I know Liz is a beginner quilter. She's got the beginner quilter class, and that's the class that she's done. And there is a picture that goes with this actually, which I will tee up for you, because she's done an incredible job. So this is what she's done. She says, as a beginner quilter trying some more difficult quilt blocks, I've discovered that my precision in the requisite 1/4 inch seam is less than precise. So a lot of unpicking, resewing, and a bit of frustration is involved in getting a block completed. That 1/16 off quickly becomes 1/8 over multiple seams and then has to be redone. I do have a 1/4 inch washi tape as that, and a 1/4 inch foot with guide, but perhaps drawing a 1/4 inch line until I can sense what a 1/4 inch would be in order. I don't want to kill the joy I hope I get from sewing. I haven't got a fancy Benina. I've got a Singer Stylist and some awesome vintage machines, including a Kenmore, Singer's White and Netchi Supernova. She says, here's the picture of the block, which it looks pretty good to me, to be honest. But we'll see what Philippa has to say. She says, here's a picture of the block I just struggled through, which included my first flying geese. So Philippa, what do we think about helping her with a 1/4 inch seams? So
Liz, it's a bit unusual this, but she started off a comment with UGH. It was a, hello Philippa, how are you? It was like, oh. So let's see what we can do to help you. Well, David did have a look, and so you've got our beginner quilters class, which is a really great class for lots and lots of techniques, but the piecing is quite simple, and this is quite a complex block here, and what I really think you need, and I'm going to talk a bit more, but I really think you need our precision piecing class, because the actual class, the block that is made in the class, is very similar to this. You've got a few extra pieces in this particular block, but it's very similar to that. And what you will know from the beginner class is it's about choosing the right fabrics, it's about really having accurate cutting, it is about accurate sewing, but if your cutting's not accurate, your seam's not going to be right if your piecing's not going to be right if your seam is correct. But it's also about pressing. Now let's just go back to your block and just have a little bit more of a look at it. So I think that is a fantastic block for a beginner quilter. It is complex, there is a lot of matching there, and on the whole just about everything is totally spot on. So
the points are brilliant, aren't they?
Yeah, your points are good, your matching of your 9 patch in the center is really excellent, you've got everything perfectly lined up. There's 1 or 2 little areas where the flying geese sews onto the outer border strip, where there's just a little bit of point missing there, but flying geese are really tricky, and it is something that even experienced quilters are always asking us about. Now there is a way of doing flying geese in the precision piecing class, which I find to be the most accurate. It is not by any means the only way, but on the whole it turns out really well. So what I don't know is, you know, whether it is to do with cutting, whether it is to do with actual 1/4 inch seam allowance, or whether it's to do with pressing. It may be a combination, it may be two of those three. You know, there are multiple factors there. So what I would say to you is, I do think that there perhaps a little bit more pressing with steam on a firmer surface would be helpful. I can particularly see on the borders, where those borders are put on, that there's almost, it's not a pleat, but it could be a little bit flatter. And what I can also see, and particularly on the top left corner, that strip there, there's some stretching in that strip. Now that to me is either cutting, so the strip is too long, or the seam allowance on all of the piecing is too wide, which means that strip doesn't fit. Now, what I always say to people is there's no magic about, you know, a 12.5 inch block when you've got it to this stage. It doesn't matter if it's 12 and 5/8 or 12 and 3/8, as long as all your blocks are of the same size. So don't kind of get hung up on that. But if my central section was beautifully flat and it had turned out a little bit smaller and I was making multiples of these for a quilt, I would not stick slavishly to that strip measurement if it was too long. What is the point of kind of forcing on that extra long strip when your piece doesn't want it in that sense? So don't get too kind of hung up on the rules. Just kind of think a bit about, you know, what have I got here? What am I going to do next? And if I follow the instructions are not always that good, you know, they can be quite tricky. You know, if you feel that you can trim a bit off or make another decision and it's going to be better, that's fine, as long as you've got consistency. So I do think that class would be tremendously valuable to you, the precision piecing class. And I don't try and do the hard sell when we are doing these live sessions. But can I just say to you that you've only got, this is everybody, not just Julie's, you've only got until Sunday to buy anything else you want in terms of quilt making and garment making, because after that the stores are closed. There are no more purchases available in order to give you 2.25 years of access to all of your classes, so that you can really maximize them before we finish at the end of 2028. So just to really recap, fabric choice is important, good quality, non-stretchy fabric is important. Okay, I do pre-wash the fabric, you know, accurate cutting, which is illustrated in the beginner class, but in more depth in the precision piecing class, is important. Sewing 1/4 inch seams, yes, they are important. I'm not a fan of guides. I don't think guides are helpful. Talk quite in depth about the needles, straight stitch plate, those kind of things which make a difference in that precision piecing class. Pressing is really important. So it is a whole combination of things. And the other thing that I would say to you, whenever you do those strips, again, sashing like that on a future occasion, if possible, cut parallel to the selvage and not across from selvage to selvage, because it stretches the least, and you will eliminate, or certainly much reduce, any kind of stretching as a longer strip gets sewn onto a block. So lots to look at, really analyze what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing fantastically. You should be extremely proud. If everybody who's watching tonight got out their first blocks that they did as beginners, yours would be right up there as one of the most outstanding, so be proud.
Yeah, that's a very good block, Liz, well done. Okay, so the next question is from Coralie, and Coralie says, because you've helped me so much with technique, what I struggle with most is design. And she reminds us that the beautiful melon border which Philippa suggested for the Bargello quilt, which I think Coralie then went ahead and created.
It was amazing. It was so professional. I thought I'd made it. It was just fantastic.
So this time she says she settled on Cleopatra's fan, and we've got some pictures here. I've settled on Cleopatra's fan as the star of the show in the quilt. I've started to go, the quilt that she started to go with her mum's embroidered pillow, and you can see the pillow top left there. She says, I've completed some of the fan blocks. Here are the first few, and we can see those in the picture. But I don't want to arrange them in rows. Okay, I have in mind a sort of modified vine pattern with strips of green sashing that matches the fan's leaves, and perhaps blocks between the fan blocks, either plain or a subtle pattern in the paler colours. Does any of this inspire one of your magnificent ideas, Philippa? Not too magnificent, of course, because it's still her doing the work. But if there's anything that you can help with, Philippa, Coralie would be grateful. And Coralie says she still has you looking over her shoulder whenever she's at her sewing machine. So, Philippa, what do we think about design to help Coralie out?
Okay, so well, I do have one or two ideas, and this actual quilt is to go with a pillow. So there's for the Brits, it's a cushion, which David, it's in the top left hand corner there, and it's a beautiful cabbage rose fabric in all of these lovely greens and pinks, and you've got a really fancy edge on there. Is it like a kind of frilled ruffle edge? Yeah, it looks amazing. Anyway, so I think that is a really good idea to make several blocks, even more than this, so that you can actually start to play with the design. And I do actually prefer to play with it kind of in fabric when the blocks are made up, rather than on paper or I like the real thing. But what I wondered was you could kind of do it in rows, but could we just go back to the picture, David? So what you could do is that the bottom row, if you rotated those 180 degrees, what you would get would be a concentration of your geometric pink piecing with a border of the green on either side. So you could do that with it. What I was thinking though is that you could actually almost make medallion shapes from this, and they could be arranged just in small sections, or they could radiate out from a centre. So if you took the bottom two, so if you're looking at the image, if you take the bottom right and you rotate it clockwise 90 degrees, and then you take the bottom left and you rotate that anti-clockwise or counterclockwise 90 degrees, you're starting to get a kind of floral star, something coming out of a central point, and then obviously a fourth block would go on the bottom there, and you've created this motif in the center. Now the motif in the center could then go on to have kind of rows around it, which could be placed as you've got them here, or they could alternate up and down, as I've just said, so that you've got a concentration of pink in the middle and green on either side. So you could build out a design from the center, but you could just take that particular motif and you could have them in rows, you could have them in offset rows, you could play with it in that way. Okay, so that is my initial idea, and then because of the border that you did previously, I came up with what I thought was a really nice idea for the border. Depending on what you do, I think you might have to try and zoom in a bit more, David, because I've just done it with a pencil and it's a bit hard to see it. But there's one block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks arranged as I had said, and then in a border you would need a triangular section, so basically a half block cut on the diagonal to fill in that motif. And so you could take and create your own slightly different piecing arrangement and make a kind of starburst that came out. And so this would be green and all of this would be green around here, and it would make kind of like a flower, and I would just have this plain and I would sash it on either side so that there was a break between what was going on in the center and what was going on in the border, so that it kind of stood out as its own design. So I know from what you did the last time, you came up with an amazing piece of work that you did beautifully, and you got it all to fit together, and it was really accomplished and really stunning. So hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought of where you could go with it. play with it in lots of different ways. I'd really like to see that border because I think it's amazing. But anyway, keep us posted. You've got until December to get that quilt top done, so off you go. You better start right now, carry on sewing this evening. But yeah, I'm excited to see what you do with it.
Great, thank you, Philippa. Just stunning designs coming out of that, so very good. Thank you, Philippa. So yeah, just a reminder, if you want any more classes, that your last chance to buy any further classes at all is this Sunday coming. We've publicised this for quite a little while now, so hopefully it's not a surprise to anybody, but you need to get your classes in, and then that will give you more than 2 years to be able to watch them before we finally probably close, and Philippa will be retiring properly at that point, rather than just semi-retiring to keep things ticking over. And the live sessions finish at the end of December, so we're going to run through till December, and then these live sessions will finish at the end of this year.
But Kelly's not going anywhere. She's going to be here right to the end, we hope. Kelly, if you're watching, don't go anywhere. Kelly, you are invaluable to us. And yeah, we'll still be here working away behind the scenes. So it's just, don't think that we're not. We are.
Okay, so next question is from Barbara Jackson. And Barbara says, "Dear Philippa, how do I prevent or fix 2 straight strips from curving after being sewn?" Now, Barbara hasn't sent us a picture of her actual pattern, but she has, or actual project, but she has sent us a picture of the pattern that she's used. So that's the pattern for the strips. And she says, I used the Moda Bella solid cotton fabric straight from the bolt and pressed it with a steam iron. I cut the lengths of strips on the straight grain parallel to the selvage. I sewed one strip 14 inches long by 4.5 inches wide, and to a narrow strip cut 14 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. I sewed the strips on my Bernina using kimono silk in the top and the bottom. You're covering all the options, aren't you, Barbara? Well done. You've obviously been listening to what Philippa tells you. I reduced foot pressure from 5.5 to 5, stitch length 2.3, needle is the Smech Microtail 68. And she's saying it's curving after being sewn. Generally, she says she washed fabric such as art gallery fabric and checked for potential bleeding of colours for red, oranges. You've been watching all of the questions, haven't you? Partially dry and then press fabric with stream before cutting, but not this time. Using the Bella Solids fabric for the first time, she wanted to minimise the manipulating the fabric because it seemed to have a lower thread count. So, so Barbara's wondering, why might it be curving, Philippa? I think we've got the explanation, but we want to know why.
Right, okay, so I think that this is probably more of a pressing issue than a cutting or a sewing issue, particularly if you are cutting your strips parallel to the selvage. When you're cutting strips across from selvage to selvage, you do sometimes get slight V's, and that actually gets worse, doesn't it, the more strips you cut. But if you're cutting down parallel to the selvage, that shouldn't really be happening. Now, I think it's maybe in the borders and facing class, but there is an fairly early class where I demonstrate, and I'll do 2 things. I do talk about banana cut, and I'll probably talk about that in precision piecing, which I don't really think is the case here, but I also show how you can press a strip into a beautiful curve, even when it was cut and sewn straight. But then I also show how you press it back again, and so a lot of it is actually in the pressing. I mean, if your tension is out and your tension's not right, that may encourage some slight pulling in of the seam, which would accentuate a curve. But if your tension is correct, that shouldn't really happen. So what I'm going to suggest you do is that next time you cut one of these out and you sew it carefully. Don't whiz it through as fast as you can. Just keep feeding it gently. Let it take itself up. Don't pull it, don't push it, and then you won't put any tension on the fabric as it's going through. So just let it feed through, yeah. Next time you take it to the iron, when you press it, make sure that you are lining up excuse me, the strip of fabric parallel to the edge of your ironing board. So don't have it angled on the ironing board, have it straight, and make sure that you are maintaining the same distance. And I did get a glass of water. Excuse me. No, I poured one out and I didn't actually bring it over to the table. Excuse me. Thank you very much, David. Sorry about that. I don't know why that happened. Oh, much better, sorry. So when you are pressing it, you are maintaining a straight strip. I think there's a tendency, if you just put it on your ironing surface randomly and you're just kind of ironing away, you put a curve on it. So that is my best guess as to what is happening with that. But yeah, all credit to you, because you're doing all of the right stuff there. Absolutely. I mean, you really have taken it all on board. So you might like to just sort of get back and let us know whether you think that that is the issue. And if you have got that class, I'm pretty sure it is in borders and facing. Have a look, because somewhere in that class I'm pretty sure that I show pressing it incorrectly and then how you get it back again. And if Antari was watching, she would be able to tell us. I'm not sure she's with us this evening, so if anybody else knows where that is, we would gratefully like to know. Thank you. So moving on to the next question.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully that helps you there, Barbara. Liz, who was asking about the block which she'd done, she's saying she's going to take the precision piecing class, and other people,
well done.
Kelly said definitely get the class, so that's good. Okay, next question is from Linda Nightingale, and we have a picture that goes with this. Linda is, if I can get the picture, there we are. Linda is trying to insert rickrack in a string of pennants. And this client, she sent this question in last month, and it just slightly missed the cut. It just came in at about 5:30, and I think we had a full count anyway. So this is from last month, but she's reminded me to put it in for this month, and she's saying, I'm trying to insert rickrack in this string of pennants. It has me stuck. The flags of two sides will hang in a string like on a clothesline. How should I insert the rickrack? And then there we have the pictures, which look like they're going to be fantastic once they're done, and even better with rickrack in. But how should she do it, Philippa?
Okay, so yeah, this is lovely, and it's quite a bit of work there, isn't there? Really nice. So I imagine this is going to go in your kitchen or somewhere similar, because it's all about ketchup and relish and all kinds of foodie things. So what I imagine is that the string or whatever holds this together gets inserted into the fold, and then you stitch down the four little sides that form the lower edge, the top edge of course being a fold. So yeah, you need to just tack that rickrack or attach that rickrack temporarily. Now if you have got our, let me think which one it's in. It's turned edge applique, I think. If you've got our turned edge applique class, I'm pretty sure the rickrack is in that one, yeah, which is about class 4 or something like that in series 1. And I do explain in that class how you go about turning corners and changing direction with your rickrack. It's actually really easy, because your rickrack is pliable and it's got that indented shape, and so it's really easy to manipulate. So I imagine that the rickrack is going to go along those 4 edges. So I would cut a length a little bit longer than you needed, and I would start at the lower point, and I would position it at the lower point with kind of the extended section at that lower point, and then I would take it up the sides, turn the corner and go up. Now then, you can baste it onto one side by tacking it by hand. You could try a little bit of fabric glue, but I think that your fabric is fairly lightweight, and so you're just a little bit concerned that the glue that needs to be strong enough to hold it together might bleed through. You could try, and you can get it in strips, something like steamer seam, which is a fusible available in strips. So you could try something like that. I mean, if it was me, I'd actually be hand basting it, because that's just kind of the person that I am, really. And then when you've got it basted in place and you've tucked the raw edges in at the top, Again, then I might either baste it or put a little bit of something like steamer seam just to hold bits of it together so that it is kind of nicely in position before you take it to the sewing machine. And then I would just top stitch on the top, not really close to the edge, because if you get too close to the edge, you may not catch the underneath. I mean, you want to be careful to try and get it all properly lined up so that the top and the bottom are sitting as much as possible on top of one another. But I would stitch it 1/8 of an inch or so in from the edge. Then you're going to catch your raw edges. It's not going to fray or anything like that. I mean, it's going to make sure that everything is held in place. You could try something like a triple stitch, fairly long, or you could do it even with a zigzag or a triple zigzag or something like that in a contrasting colour. So you have a look at the stitches on your sewing machine, have a little play with them, and see what suggests itself. But I would certainly try it out on just a scrap without any, you know, not one of your real pieces, just fabric, to see how you go first. But that is what I would do with it. And if you have got that class, it is worth having a visit, because there might be 1 or 2 other tips in there as well. So I wonder how long this bunting is going to be and how many you're actually making. It might just be the 3 if you don't like doing the rip-rap, or it could be a lot more than that.
Okay, we've got now Jane D61 has left a comment. I wonder whether that's Jane DeHart, because we read out your message at the beginning. If you are Jane, she's asked a question. She said, Philippa, why are you in the kitchen, and what's going to happen to your fabulous sewing room? So why are we in the kitchen, Philippa?
Because I have well, for lots of reasons really, but mainly I'm kind of reclaiming the space, and I've banged on for months about this renovation project, which the builders started, I think it was the 3rd of February, and we're still nowhere near through it. And the house is just rammed with furniture and wallpaper and light fittings and things, many of which are stored in the studio. But it is, every time we have a session and we film in the studio with so much stuff, I have to clear it all away and stop working on what I'm working on and everything like that. And as we're as we are answering questions and we're not actually demonstrating anything, it doesn't matter where we are in the house. And so I've kind of reclaimed the space, and I'm cutting myself a little bit of slack, and trying to flow with the never-ending building project.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to tee up the picture for the next one, but my mouse is not playing the game. Okay, so the next question is from Katie Rules, and Katie says, I've learned so much from your classes. Thank you for making them available around the world. I began hand piecing this quilt more than 30 years ago, and this is the picture. I began hand piecing this quilt more than 30 years ago. I've just had it quilted and I'm ready to trim and bind it. My plan is to trim using a template similar to the tissue paper in the attached photo. I don't have much experience binding curves. I would appreciate your advice on getting the best possible outcome. I've watched the class on piping and binding and will watch it again, and that's from Katie Rules. What do you think, Philippa?
So Katie, I am so proud of you for actually finishing that. I mean, gosh, what a project, hand piecing all of that together. Now, I know you haven't been working on it continually for the last 30 years, but I do always think that it doesn't matter how long a project takes. And I actually think that it doesn't even matter if you don't finish a project, as long as you've enjoyed the doing, you know. That's as much a part of it as anything else. And honestly, it's as relevant today as it was 30 years ago. It hasn't dated at all, has it? It looks absolutely amazing. So, if you've got it in your library, Further Fabulous Finishes discusses and illustrates and shows you how to deal with quilt edges that are a different shape from normal, so not just curved. You know, we look at things like binding hexes and that kind of thing, those much more complex shapes. So it is well worth looking at that if you have got it. However, what I would say to you is you need to cut your binding on the bias. and I would definitely suggest that you make a sample first, because when you cut your binding on the bias, it tends to stretch and it can end up being a little bit too narrow. But I would also do a single binding, not a double folded binding, and we explored that in terms of a single binding in the miniature quilts class. But your single binding, there's just less fabric, it'll go around those curves more easily, and where you've got the change from a curve to a straight edge, again we show you how to do that mitre. In fact, I think in the curved piecing class there is an additional handout that shows you how to mitre when you are doing a curved thing. So if you've got that class, there's a handout there that would really help you as well. So there's several sources, but you've got less bulk at those places because you're simply not playing with as much fabric. So what I'm saying to you is, if you've got the curved piecing class, I think there's an extra handout in there that talks about binding curved quills. It is a double folded binding, but that will help you with the actual little change of direction where you go from a curve to a straight edge. Cut it on the bias, do a single folded binding. We know you don't mind hand sewing if you started hand piecing this all together, so you'd be perfectly happy to do that, and do a little tester section first. You know, just you can do that on the real quilt if you sew it on with a big stitch, because it's easy to unpick, to make sure that you are cutting sufficient width to your binding, because it will tend to stretch a little bit, but all very doable and well worthwhile, and I can see definitely that you have the skills.
Very good, thank you. Okay, next question. 2 more questions to go. The next question is from Frances Cobb, and Frances says, what should I write? And she says, machine embroider on not fancy on a not fancy sewing machine. So with that to be said, what should she write on a quilter label celebrating her grandson's 18th birthday? And should she put a washing label on it? What do we think, Philippa?
So Frances, I had a little chuckle about this when I read this, and I think that you should put a label on it, and it should say, when this quilt needs laundering, return it to Grandma. No, I'm being a bit flippant. But I think I mentioned this only last month, but I'm going to mention it again because it is so relevant. When our son Dan went off to university and he'd washed his sheets, and he phoned up and I was away working, but Peter was at home, and he said, I've washed my sheets, Dad, but I can't find an iron. And Peter went, iron? Iron? There's going to be kids there not going to wash their sheets all year. You're not ironing those sheets, put them back on the bed. And then when I came, he said, what have you done to that child? Because I do iron my sheets, so there's nothing nicer than getting into a bed with freshly laundered sheets. So what am I going to say to you on this? I do like this question. I mean, in Further Fabulous Finishes, I do chat about labels. I don't machine embroider labels. I'm not a big fan of them, really. I use a computer, and I write what I want on the computer in a font that I've chosen, and I print that out on a piece of paper. I put that piece of paper on a light box, and then I put my fabric on top of that, and then with a permanent fabric marker I write on it. I just think it just looks nicer. I like it better. But anyway, whatever you think on that, really. I just we've given these as gifts on occasions, but mainly to the garment makers. But there's a lovely little range of labels that are made by Kylie and the Machine, and they're all kind of different ones. I think they're the ladies Australian. You can get them in the States and the UK and places, and all sorts of things. One says hello gorgeous, and then this was one, I put this in the wedding dress that I made recently, and I'm not sure you should put it on your grandson's quilt because it says in glittery writing made to party. You're not going to put that on a quilt for your grandson. But this one is look after me, treat me with care, use common sense, wash only when dirty, mend me if I break. I mean, that one's fairly suitable. Yes, I do think you should put a laundering label on it, but I think also when you give this to your grandson, I think you should give him a little letter explaining that for as long as you are around, you'd be really happy to launder it for him. And then when you are no longer around, if he's still got this quilt, which you probably will, because it's going to be very precious to him, you say, give it to your mum to sort it out, and then it won't get wrecked, will it? So we'd love to see it, and we'd love a picture of your grandson too. So, you know, please, Francis, give us the full story.
Thank you. Frances is obviously watching live. She says she's laughing as well, so that's good. Okay, and yeah, Jane's just posted. She said iron sheets. So there's a few people in Peter's camp there. I think you're right. Okay, the last question then is from Christina Ruiz. R-U-I-Z, Ruiz, I think. Is that? I'm not quite sure how we pronounce that. Anyway, Christina. Christina says, hello Philippa and David. I had the great opportunity to attend a 3-day course with Philippa here in Spain 10 years ago. There are lots of people that would love to be on a 3-day course with Philippa these days, but she doesn't do those courses anymore. It was absolutely worth it. Due to various events in my life, patchwork had to be put aside for a while. Fortunately, I now have the time to return to it and participate in your classes again before you stop running them. Back then, I took many notes, but some were incomplete, which has left me with a few doubts. You might have answered my questions in the past, but I cannot find any notes or answers. So, I'm sorry, there's a few questions coming up. I'm sorry if I'm asking you to repeat yourself. I'd be very grateful if you could clarify the following. First,
so can you just ask me one at a time? Because there are so many, yeah, and then I'll answer them.
Okay, so first question is, Philippa, you pre-wash your wadding and backing fabric before quilting, don't you? Do you dry it on the washing line? Do you lay the wadding out to dry on a carpet, pinning it in place for 2 or 3 days until it's completely dry, or what? So pre-washing your wadding and backing fabric.
Okay, so yes, I would pre-wash my backing fabric on a gentle cycle, and I have what's called a Sheila made that Peter made, that wonderful husband of mine, which is wooden slats with a metal piece on the end and a pulley, and it gets laid across the slats, and then it is ironed when it's dry. So definitely pre-wash the backing fabric. I pre-wash all my fabric, but it isn't washing the batting or the wadding, it is soaking it. So I soak it and then I spin it. And the reason for doing that is I tend to use natural fibres. It will shrink it. It fluffs up the surface, which makes the layers stick together better when I'm machine quilting it, and it makes it softer, so the needle of the sewing machine goes through it more easily. But I tend to, what do I do with it? I tend to just, lay it out, but just lay it on the floor on a big sheet, maybe an unironed sheet this time, okay, until it's dry. Don't need to pin it out or leave it for any specific amount of time. Just lay it out until it's dry. If you wash it, some battings, some waddings are quite unstable and can end up in holes, particularly bamboo waddings. So you don't want to be doing that. And also you don't want to be putting it in a really tough kind of drying cycle, in my opinion, in your dryer. So just treat it gently, yeah. So you can soak it in the bath or a big bucket, big plastic bucket or something like that. Give it a gentle spin and then just let it air dry. Okay, next question.
What sort of speed do you spin it at?
Oh my goodness.
So Peter's asking what sort of speed do you spin it at? Well, it's kind of...
Yeah, so what I would choose is the most gentle spin in the washing machine, and then if I felt that it wasn't spun sufficiently, I would spin it a second time. What do you do with your batting, Peter?
Okay, moving on, Peter. We're running out of time.
The washing machine spins anything from at least 600 to up to 1200.
So does my head when I'm talking to you.
Okay. So the next part, I think you've kind of answered, which is how many times do you dampen and dry the quilt during the making? We'll ask it. How many times do you dampen and dry the quilt during the making process, and do you repeat it after attaching the binding as well? Did you answer that?
Okay. So when the quilt is all quilted, so when the backing and the batting or the wadding and the quilt top are all quilted and sewn together, but before they have any piping or binding on them, when they still have excess fabric around the edge, we always like to leave a good margin, I will put it onto a sheet on a carpeted floor and spritz it and smooth it out and pin it with those big yellow-headed quilted pins into the floor to kind of smooth it all out and kind of get it into a nice regular shape. I will then mark on the outer edge with a pencil or a pen. The line designates where the thing is going to be cut when I trim off all the excess, and I put the piping on before I trim away the excess, so I've got a much firmer, stable edge to sew the piping on. If I cut it down and then sew the piping on, it's likely that I may stretch that edge. When the piping is sewn on, then I trim it down, then I bind it, and then it goes back onto the carpeted floor. It is spritzed and laid out and measured through the vertical, the horizontal, the diagonal, and pinned into the floor again. So it's done twice, but only at the very end of the making. Okay, next question.
Okay, what I didn't show you,
It shows that at the end.
Oh, okay, okay.
Next
Christina's got some pictures from the course 10 years ago. The next question is, finally, I would like any recommendation for threads available in Spain that are equivalent to the bottom line 60 weight and the bottom line silk 100 weight. So, any suggestions for other?
Right, okay. I mean, I don't know what thread you've got available in Spain. My sister lives in Barcelona. Maybe we should direct your question to her. I mean, you don't have to ship from the US. What is it like shipping from the UK? Because a lot of these things are available in the UK and also possibly in France. I mean, Guttermans and Guttermans and Superior Threads are the best for silk, but there will be other manufacturers. Orifil is Italian, isn't it? But I don't know whether they do any silk, but they certainly do polyester, so I would look at the Orifil, but I'm not sure. But I would look at other European countries where you might ship from, and I know that the UK is no longer in the EU, but shipping from the UK might be cheaper than shipping from America, and I would look into the full Orifil range, which we tend only to see their cotton, but they make a big range of threads, so investigate them. But other than that, I haven't got very much information on that, Christina. So now we can look at the photos.
So there we go. There's so this is Christina. I'm imagining, I don't know who that lady is that keeps appearing in there. She looks like a very younger version of Philippa.
Well, it's quite interesting actually, because interesting on several levels there, that you've taken such a lot of photographs of me, which is very flattering. But I've still got quite a lot of those clothes, and it looks like I've gone for about 2 weeks because I don't know how many different dresses I'm wearing. But anyway, it's lovely to kind of reconnect after all of that time, really, and to know that what we looked at way back 10 years ago is still relevant today, and you're still finding inspiration from that. I mean, I always loved all the travel and the teaching. You know, the students were always so delighted that you went, and especially when you went a long way, they were really, really grateful that you'd taken the trouble to kind of go the distance, and literally go the distance, but also were very receptive to new ideas and could see the possibilities. So it's really lovely to see that. So thank you for sending that lovely reminder, Christina. It's really nice to have a little trip down memory lane.
Okay, so a couple more comments and then we've got the winners to announce. So Frances Cobb, who has made the quilt for her grandson. She said, thank you so much. However, Edward's mum said no one has a single quilt anymore. So she had to make a double, and there's no way I'm ordering that, ha ha, she says. So thanks for the help. She says she'll send a photo when she's done. Somebody has posted to say Wonderful Europe have a good range and free shipping in Europe over €70. So I think that's probably somebody that works for Wonderful Europe or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's so that there are other threads out there. I think that was all the comments that I saw. Peter, come and announce the winners for us.
Did you notice that Limelight was in the middle of it?
I did, yeah, it was the book. It's the book.
Oh, it's the book, right, okay.
Yeah.
Hello, gorgeous.
All right, okay. Right, the lucky winners are Kathy Quantrill and Sarah Brown.
Fantastic. So, Kathy and Sarah, well done. You will be getting new rotary cutting blades, so no excuse for not having accurate cutting once they arrive. David will get in touch with you and we'll find out where you want your gifts sending to. So, that actually is nice timing, isn't it? Lots of information there, lots of great questions we're able to answer in a little bit more depth than sometimes we are able to. We will be back with you towards the end of September. We've got September, October, November and December for live sessions, so still plenty of live sessions. Don't forget, if there is anything else that you would like to purchase, you only have until Sunday. I would hate for it to get to Monday morning and you've realised that you'd forgotten to do something that you wanted to do. So we hope that you enjoy the next month and that you have some lovely questions ready for us in September, and we look forward to chatting to you then. So from David,
Bye-bye.
and from Peter,
Bye-bye.
and from me, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you